Hello and welcome to a Dungeon Defenders 2 video. In this video I'm going to be discussing pretty much what 90% of the game is all about, which is the grinding part of the game. In this video I'm going to be basically talking about Chaos Towers. So what basically Chaos Towers are, essentially they're pretty much the bread and butter of Dungeon Defenders 2, because when you begin the game, it's the campaign. You basically focus on the campaign, but the campaign is essentially just a thing to get you set up, get you started, and essentially get you going in Dungeon Defenders. I would say definitely more than half uh, of the game's content is actually Chaos Towers and doing things like, well, I guess incursions, I guess. Although I'll talk about incursions in a different video. They're actually not that different. I mean, I think right now, I guess they classify as being a little bit easier than Chaos Towers. I would say Chaos Towers right now are like the very top thing that you can do, as well as the hardest thing that you can do in the game. It's essentially, I guess, well, it's still at its core a defense game. So you'll be defending, of course, you'll be defending most of the time. However, it's a little bit different, as in this particular mode, enemies are very much harder. They also come in higher numbers. The more players there are, the higher the numbers of the enemies, and they're pretty tough. Actually, they're actually a lot tougher than your average. Definitely a lot tougher than any of the enemies that you might fight in the campaign mode. And this is where you grind the most loot. This is where you grind the best stuff for your characters. This is where you grind some some special shards that you cannot grind anywhere else. And these shards are essentially kind of special, as they kind of strengthen your character. And obviously you want to definitely add the shards to make your character even stronger. My shards are actually not even maxed out yet, because at first, when I was doing the campaigns, I thought that gold wasn't gonna be an issue. I was basically mostly focused on collecting defender medals, which are the thing you need to acquire like new characters and essentially the best part of everything in the game. So I wasn't that worried about gold, but it turns out that if you really want to become strong enough and you really want to invest in upgrading some stuff, and gold, that's where gold becomes an issue, because you drain that stuff so quickly that it's just gone. It's the one currency that you always have that is gone. Well, aside from defender medals. Um, right now, I'm basically doing a Chaos Tower 1 with a random group I just joined in. Yeah, I was actually lucky enough in this game to actually have someone in my group that actually was... They knew what they were doing, and they have done like they did modes like this before, so they did know what they were doing. So at least, you know, we had that was useful. And you definitely want to be with people who know what they're doing, because if you're with a group that doesn't know what they're doing, then there is such a thing as being wiped out in one wave, like in the very first wave. And that actually has happened to me when I joined in with a group that actually had no idea what they were doing. I joined in, they already had like all the they already had maxed out all the defenses, and there were no more defenses that they could have built. My defenses, like the barricades that I would have actually placed, were way more powerful. They had way more health, and they probably would have had a higher chance. But for whatever reason, they decided to just keep on their own. And I mean, that would make sense, except that their own defenses were not exactly very powerful. So the enemies ended up piling up on them and destroying them almost instantly. And yeah, you get swarmed, because like I said, the more players there are in the game, the more enemies you'll be facing. Now I have noticed that the towers, the Chaos Towers, can be soloed, and I almost have done that myself before people actually join, because I always usually just, you know, even if I'm going to create a game on Chaos Tower, it's always good to play on public just to have that extra help. I guess it doesn't really matter, because you'll essentially, what changes with more players is that enemies become more plentiful. They essentially have higher numbers, and I have noticed that there are also more bosses. I think they're like, it's like most of the time there are cases where you will fight like up to 2 bosses at a time, and yeah, I think with one player you only get the one anyways. I mean, in Chaos Towers, from you basically after completing the very first wave, the second wave it kind of guarantees you to actually have it's a pretty much a guaranteed of it's a guaranteed battle with a boss. There is always bosses, and they are pretty powerful, and you have to actually learn them to actually be able to deal with them. Still, in the opposite, it's actually I guess it's good to actually be able to solo it, because this is actually really good for me, because I have noticed that there aren't many people actually doing Chaos Towers. I don't know if they're actually if there are actually people more than what I'm thinking they are, but for whatever reason, every time I try to log into a Chaos Tower match, there aren't really that many people, and I usually have to at some point make a public game myself and just host it so I can actually start, which is weird. Still, I guess that the game isn't really that famous, and it doesn't really have that big of an audience or something. So I guess, yeah, I mean, it's been out for a while now. It actually existed on the PC for a while, and it also existed on the console as well. In the console you just had to pay for it back at the time. It was actually a pay-to-play game before they made the option to make it free to play. So yeah, in the Chaos Towers, I guess what I really definitely like about the Chaos Towers is the kind of remnants. They kind of remind me of like Diablo, back when I played Diablo 3. It's essentially that kind of style of play where you're essentially killing enemies, gaining loot to become stronger, so you can kill stronger enemies to gain more loot to become stronger, and that's essentially what the game is all about. Most of the game is all about grinding, and you will grind a lot. If you're not a big fan of grinding, like spending hours just doing the game over and over and just grinding tons and tons of stuff, then taking your time to like associate your items to like see which item is actually more stronger, which item gives you the better stats. And right now the way this like associating items and placing them all over the place is a little bit, I don't know, complicated. It's not really that fast. You kind of spend, I don't know, like a good 30 minutes just associating your items, especially when you have a lot of items. And yeah, it would have definitely used a little bit of an improvement. It would have used like to make it, I don't know, a bit more smooth with the UI. Still, yeah, it's all about getting that good loot, which actually, I guess there is some form of strategy, as in you're making, strategy with your inventory, managing your inventory is to make sure that you are, equipped with the best items to become as strong as possible, and then strategy with your with your defenses, which essentially make it so that every time you're actually fighting, like you actually do need to like have a strategy with your defenses. You need to acknowledge what do you do with like barricades, what do you do with turrets, and what do you do with traps, and that's very important actually. This is something that I've learned, that it's very important to know. So you have 3 types of traps, essentially defenses, and like I said, this is essentially it's the defenses, the turrets, and the traps. Well, the barricades actually. The barricades, the turrets, and the traps. So the barricades are essentially the defenses that you place onto a game, where, well, you place them in a lane where essentially they stop enemies from going through. They will essentially block enemies from going through, like they call it, they're barricades. So, and the enemies will basically focus on them, just trying to destroy them, and they'll focus on before they can move on to the next place. So they're the best thing to use when you're like stopping enemies from going through. Then we have turrets, which are essentially your very basic sentry turrets. You basically place them and they shoot at enemies. And I'm guessing they deal the most damage. When it comes to, they definitely deal more damage than the barricades. And of course we also have the traps, which are actually very interesting, because traps, while they have a limit to how they can be used, they have an energy limit. What makes them apart from the turrets is that they cannot be destroyed, while turrets can be destroyed. And some enemies, especially bosses, have such a huge reach that they can actually destroy your turrets very, very quickly and almost instantly, essentially wasting all your mana. You definitely don't want to waste that mana, you want to use that mana. Like the amount of times I've gone into a game and I've actually like we actually have lost the game because my teammates weren't actually using their mana to repair their defenses and then upgrade them when like the phases began, in the build phases, and like essentially adding some defenses that are actually useful for all kinds of enemies, such as flying enemies. Like literally there would be no one would actually place any flying enemy traps. So, and that would actually end up being taking like making us lose the game because of that. And it's a little bit of an annoyance, I guess. After learning how to play the game, knowing how to do things, it does come to a point where you definitely want a teammate who knows what they're doing, or at least if they're not going to do anything, if they don't trust themselves, or if they don't know how to what to do, how to do it, then the least they can do is just use the D-pad to they use the left D-pad to essentially drop their mana, so their teammates can use that mana. And obviously you want to use it to the person who's like actually building and upgrading. Like pay attention to what your teammate is doing. Like if he's trying to build something, then maybe if there's like a defense that is in low health, you can also build. You can essentially rebuild it, like help repair it. Also, like at every wave, you either want to like if your defense limit is not maxed out, you definitely want to upgrade your defenses at all times. You want to upgrade them as much as possible. If you don't have enough, maybe a teammate will have enough, so you can actually drop your mana and combine together. You can have enough to upgrade something. Excuse me. So it would be actually a very nice. It does encourage teamwork, and the only time you don't really need teamwork is when you join someone who actually has been playing the game for a very long time, and he's like ascension level like 100 plus. And I have seen people who are over like 300 ascension level. So what is ascension level is essentially after all your hero characters have a cap limit, a level cap limit of 50. So they will reach level 50 before they can no longer level up. However, they can actually level up even further through ascension levels. Ascension levels is essentially, I guess, it's kind of like, I guess, like an over level, like you're leveling up past like the limit. And yeah, essential levels actually have no limits. You can essentially upgrade your essential levels over and over, and through the essential level skill tree, you can essentially make your characters somewhat stronger than regular. And this definitely, I guess, I don't know if it actually makes a difference, although I have noticed after game of Chaos Towers that I have been getting stronger. I don't know if it's also part of my gear. Right now I'm actually at the point where where my gear actually needs to become stronger, and I need to go to Chaos Towers 2. But the question is there going to be anyone who's going to be able to help me with Chaos Tower 2 and so forth? So it's starting to come to a point where you go from Chaos Tower 1, then you go to Chaos Tower 2, then 3, up until number 7, which was recently added. So if you don't mind the grinding, if you don't mind like playing like the same levels over and over, and essentially grinding for better loot and stuff, all the while acquiring all those defender medals and resources in order to acquire new characters and maybe new things, I guess, then yeah, you can definitely consider the game that it's definitely fun. Although I definitely have noticed that it's actually quite fun when you actually can talk to your teammates and like talk strategies and like report of like what's going on, like which defense actually needs repairing, where is a boss, like, and what he's doing. So I would definitely, like, if you can talk with your teammates, like if they're your friends or something. So the one thing that I definitely want to point out about Chaos Towers is that if you are a committed grinder and you actually don't mind like doing something over and over for like the best stuff and everything, there is actually a flip side. There is a gain that you actually get in the overall, which is defender medals. The Chaos Towers essentially they're essentially the best place to farm defender medals, as they actually drop a good amount of defender medals. You actually gain up to 25 defender medals if you actually win a Chaos Tower. And this is from just the Chaos Tower number 1. So compared to, I guess, in the main campaign, you actually gain like a decent defender medals the first time you go around, but after that, you only gain like 5 defender medals per match, and that is actually reduced depending on how higher your level is and how weak the actual stage is and stuff like that. But in the Chaos Tower, I have noticed that you always gain, every time you win, you gain a nice steady supply of 25 defender medals. Now this of course still means you'll be doing a lot of grinding. However, combine that with the you basically grinding for better loot, better gear, maybe some gold, because that stuff just disappears, and as well as becoming stronger by ascension levels. Also, you can also use that as an advantage by, well, essentially you will acquire defender medals. So if you are a committed grinder, you'll actually acquire defender medals. And on top of that, another thing that I have noticed is that you will also acquire what is actually called as Chaos Tower shards, which are essentially unique to each Chaos Tower. And I have noticed that with each Chaos Tower, there is like Chaos Tower Shard 1, there is 2, and each one being stronger and stronger. So they do give a decent reward, which is interesting. But yeah, this actually covers up basically most of what the Chaos Towers are. I hope you found this like information, like, I don't know, useful. And yeah, if you're a committed grinder, you actually might be able to make good use of this. So yeah, thanks for watching. Stay cool, and I guess I'll see you in the next video. Or whenever. Bye!